Hello everyone, I'm Money Zen. A lot of people right now are thinking about how to make money. But have you ever thought about what you're going to do after you make that money? Money for us is like a hot potato. You can't hold on to it for long. Why did your genes survive for tens of thousands of years, but your ancestors' wealth didn't get passed down to you? Why are you still suffering from making money? Don't you have even one or two ancestors who actually made some money? The answer is simple. Because money depreciates when it just sits in your hand. Why does inflation exist in this world? It's because the world has people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, people who changed the way we live. They created jobs for huge numbers of unemployed people. In a market of constant competition, your salary keeps rising too. Once everyone has more money, they start spending. That's why even the little cafe downstairs raises its prices. A Starbucks coffee that used to be $3 might cost $5 today. But all I want to say is, if you believe there will be more Elon Musks in the future, you believe technology will keep advancing, then the problem of inflation will never be solved. Especially after the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve keeps printing money, making dollars worth even less. So, what we should think about is, how do we stop the money we hold from depreciate? And the method I've been openly sharing all this time is real estate investment. A few years ago, a lot of people said when the Fed raises rates, housing prices will crash. Money Zen, you're still telling people to buy houses, you're harming them. But during these past few years of rate hikes, housing prices not only didn't crash, but kept going up every year. And now, the US government can't handle high interest rate anymore. So we've entered a rate cutting cycle. Everyone knows the country that owes the most money to the world is the US. They owe a full $38 trillion right now. Every 1% rate hike means an extra $380 billion in interest. So if you owe someone money, would you ever voluntarily say, I want to pay you back even more? The US already pays $1 trillion a year just in interest. That's why Trump keeps pressuring the Fed to cut rates. Some people say the previous rate hikes were to suppress inflation. But after years of high rates, did inflation really get suppressed? Inflation isn't fully down yet, but the economy is about to run into trouble. So they're forced to lower the rates again. Hiking rates to suppress inflation was never a real solution. It's just an excuse. Because the real problem is the trade war. The US increased tariffs on China and the rest of the world, plus Russia-Ukraine war on top of that. It's caused by the shortage of commodities and energy. Logically, the most effective way is to reduce tariffs or stimulating imports is the most fundamental solution. But the Fed chose rate hikes in the past, and the reason of it, many people think it's a conspiracy. But if you look at the real history, you will find out that the US harvested the world's second largest economy, Japan. They used the exact same way to grab a bargain. Push up the US dollar at first, make your country's assets depreciate, then buy your country's assets at the absolute bottom. Make the people of your country work for the people of our country. But honestly, you don't need to understand everything. You only need to think about, will real estate crash now? If it crashes, what are we gonna do? Will we get trapped? Or now is the time to enter the market? And the answers to these questions depend on our original intention for investing in real estate. If you haven't figured it out, then your descendants will go through the exact same thing you're experiencing now. That is searching on the internet. Will the housing prices crash in 2023? Will the housing prices crash in 2024? Will the housing prices crash in 2025? Will the housing prices crash in the future? This kind of question. So if you don't want to rent for the rest of your life and help someone else pay off their mortgage, you gotta watch this video till the end. I sincerely wish all of you who like this video will reach financial freedom soon. And if you wanna figure out how to become wealthy, how to become an entrepreneur, an investor, you can just like over 1 million brothers and sisters in the Chinese channel. Subscribe to my channel for free and turn on the little bell. Alright, some people love to overgeneralize, thinking that us investors are just blindly betting on rising housing prices. Said that housing prices around the world just keep going up and never go down. But anyone who has actually made money with us knows that's not what we're saying, because we investors love the moment when the housing prices go down. Everyone should have a chart of housing prices in their minds. If I told you the housing prices have never gone down, you wouldn't believe it, right? If your eyes are working, you can clearly see that every time housing prices reach point A, they always drop to point B. This is called a correction. You could also just understand it as drop, but absolutely not a crash. Some people love to scare you, saying, if you bought the house at point A, what you gonna do? When you sell at point B, you're gonna lose money, and they'll call you a fool, right? Yeah, if you listen to them, buy at point A and sell at point B, of course, you'll lose money. But if you know the whole game rules of real estate, you will know the housing prices have been trending upward over the long term. But there are cycles in the process of rising. Basically means the housing prices won't just rise straight up. Instead, when they go up to point A, they will drop to point B. For example, 2003 SARS, 2008 financial crisis, or the real estate slumps in 2013 and 2016. Even with the 2020 pandemic, you've seen prices drop to point B. And when that happens, some people will jump out and say housing prices are going to crash. Then you panic and sell the house. As a result, you'll see every time you just sold the house at point B, countries around the world start printing money to stimulate the economy, and the housing market will directly rebound. The magnitude of the housing price surge is even higher than all previous point A. Why? It's simple. Take the past few years as example. Some people love to say that if the Fed hikes rates, housing prices will crash. But in the last 5 years, 3 of them were in rate hike stage, and yet the US housing prices rose by an average of 45 to 58%. Now, the Fed is not just cutting rates, they're stopping quantitative tightening. What do you think will happen to the housing prices? Is it that those people who originally wanted to sell their house will immediately decide not to sell? Or they'll start asking for much higher prices, right? And for the people who want to buy a house, they see the rates cut, they'll be worried about the housing prices will skyrocket. So everybody rushed in, hoping to snatch some bargains in the last stage. In this situation, supply drops and the demand surges instantly, and the prices rebound sharply, right? It's always the same. Because housing prices are like a speeding train. When it's too fast, the driver hits the brake. That's the correction. Hitting the brakes is to slow down from point A to point B. But when have you ever seen hitting the brakes make the train go backwards? Our history has shown us the cycle of every correction won't last long. Only about 5 years at most. So, the most important mind technique in buying a house is investment. Investment is not speculation. Speculation is short-term. Investment is long-term. It means before you buy a house, you should plan to hold it for at least 5 years. For us investors, we can't buy and sell houses very frequently because first thing we have to pay taxes, which means the cost of buying and selling are extremely high. We're not saying we buy today and then sell tomorrow for a 500,000 profit because the taxes within might be $1 million. At that point, we will still losing money. So we won't chase volatility or price differences. If you want to speculate, learn to trade stocks with me, not houses. So if you hear someone told you, if you buy at point A, you'll get trapped when the price drops to point B, you don't have to listen to them, basically, because they are harming you. Got it? These people don't understand what investing is at all. These types of people just ride on hot topics to make themselves famous. But real investors like us will never let the market noise interfere because we completely know the whole historical trends of the housing prices. We clearly know that the housing prices are always going up in the long term. You have to know this clearly. Then we can talk about the methods to directly make the money. The Fed is in a rates cutting cycle now. We will be at point A, or we might be at point A. And it looks like if we buy now, we'll lose money. So how do we position our strategies to make money? I really don't want you to get harmed by those crash talkers. So I'm sharing this mind technique openly, hoping you'll support me with a like. Remember, real investors are actually just calculating this. Let's say I bought a house for $10 million. I borrow 80% of the money from the bank. So I only pay a 20% for down payment. I promise the bank to pay back their money in 30 years. And the current interest rate for a mortgage is about 6.3%. Then my monthly payment is about $50,000. So let's assume if the US continues cutting rates after a year, let me exaggerate a bit. Mortgage rates also drop to 5.3%. Then my monthly payment is about $45,000. That's a $5,000 saving every month. $60,000 for a year. Then I'll be more exaggerate. If 2 years later, the US cuts rates again. The mortgage rates follow along drop to 4.3%. The monthly payment is just about $40,000. From $50,000 to $40,000, $10,000 saving per month, right? $120,000 for a year, which means if the mortgage rate's really down to 4.3%, buying a year later saves $60,000 in interest per year. Buying 2 years later saves $120,000 in interest per year. So buying 2 years later saves a total of $3.6 million in over 30 years, right? Some people hear this and get scared, thinking, wait, 2 years later will save that much interest. But what we investors see is opportunity. We'll think, in the worst case, even the US keeps cutting rates for 2 years. Even if it's 2% decrease, we'll pay an extra $100,000 in interest. But if now a landlord is getting scared because of the sale price in market, a house that was originally worth 10 million, now he's willing to sell me at 8 million. That's a 2 million price difference, right? And if the US keeps cutting rates, even in the worst case, all I need to pay is just an extra few $100,000 in interest. In other words, I use 8 million plus a few $100,000 in extra cost. I could buy a house worth 10 million. At that point, I make the money when I buy. But let's assume that 10 million house, he's only willing to cut a 100,000, but we have to pay 100,000 more. Should we still buy it or not? We can still buy it because, like we said, in the worst case, 2 years of continuous rate cuts. All we need to pay is an extra 100,000 if the US stops cutting rates a year later. We only need to pay the first year's extra 60,000. By then, we can refinance and replace the loan through a mortgage, which will also bring the interest rate down. But housing prices might keep rising because of rate cuts, plus the end of QT. Put it simply, we investors just calculate one thing. If the Fed continues cutting rates in the future, our mortgage interest now will be higher. I count your rate with a 2% reduction. How much extra do we have to pay? And if the housing price increase now is greater than the extra money we need to pay, then we can buy these undervalued properties. So in our investor circle, during this period, we've already been quietly buying these properties that are clearly undervalued. Because we believe in history, when the Fed cuts rates, it means they're about to print money to harvest depreciated assets. Money will lose value, but assets' price will rise higher and higher. All we need to do is just harvest along with them. In other words, the actual extra amount we need to pay will be lower than what we estimated in the worst case. Make sense? If you don't understand, you can listen to it a few more times for free. Actually, the game of Monopoly has been popular for so many years, but most people only know how to play it. They don't realize it already teaches us the method to achieve financial freedom, which is to use the money we earn to buy real estate and let it bring us passive income. But the biggest problem with buying a house isn't interest rate fluctuation, isn't the economy being bad, it's about having no money. A lot of people want to be independent and have their own family, but once they move out, half of their monthly salary goes to the rent. After deducting living expenses and transportation fee, the money left over disappears after one yearly trip, and the cost of living keeps rising because of inflation. But their salary increases will never keep up. They think that by skipping 2 meals, sacrificing entertainment fee, and putting money into stocks, ETFs, insurance, and so on, can prepare for the future. But then they discover the stocks they bought have dropped by almost half. Do you know why most people have to go through all of this? It's because they don't have their own career. They have jobs, which is earning money for other people, but they have never earned money for themselves. They think starting a business is a high-risk thing. They think because no one around them is starting a business, they themselves can't start one. Why? Because no school in the world has a teacher who can teach you how to start a business. To be blunt, these teachers are wage earners too. They can only teach what school allows them to teach, which is to train you to become a good employee, so you can work for our bosses instead. But I'm telling you, entrepreneurship actually can be learned. It is also a science one that can be replicated and practiced. In today's era, if you compare yourself with people from the past, you are probably a failure. But if we use the internet and compare ourselves with people who haven't even entered the game yet, we can become the first batch of gold diggers. And all you're missing is a mentor who actually has real progress in entrepreneurship. I hope I could be your mentor. Subscribe now. and turn on the little bell. And now comes the content with the highest value. The real profitable way to invest in property is raising a chicken that lays eggs, not slaughtering the chicken. What does that mean? Some people will argue with me, money zen, if I don't sell the house. It's just paper wealth. But all my money, including my family, is tied up in the house. What if something happens in the family? That's because you don't understand finance at all. If you are living in a 10 million house, you can mortgage it and get 5 or 6 million in loans. If one day the house goes up to 15 million, you can mortgage out even more. Even if you spend those money, your house is still there. But if all you got is cash, then once you spend it, you have nothing left. Remember, a house doesn't need to be sold to become cash. The house itself is cash. What I'm about to say can really change your fate. I have a friend. He lives in a house worth $3 million, but he lives a poor life. Why? Because the only thing his dad left him was that one house. He couldn't sell it to support his living. One day he invited me to dinner. He told me his company only makes over $100,000 a year. Not enough for him to feed his family. So he started thinking about asking me how to sell his house. He wanted to sell it, get some cash out, and buy a $1 or $2 million house instead. But he hadn't decided which one to sell. So he asked me. I told him, you just need to mortgage the house at the bank. He asked me, you mean I mortgage the house, borrow some money to use, right? But is the house still mine? I told him, of course, the house is still yours, as long as you can pay the mortgage on time. He thought for a moment and said, no, that doesn't make sense. I sell the house to improve my living, as what you said. Won't I owe the bank more and more money? If I spend the money I borrow, I still have to pay it later. No? I said, how much did your dad pay for this house back then? He said, about $1 million. I said, and now even with the housing prices down, it's still worth $3 million, right? If you believe what history shows you, that the housing prices are trending up in the long term, then your house is a chicken that lays eggs. You can sell the eggs, but you absolutely cannot slaughter the chicken, because the chicken will keep growing and lay even more eggs. If you mortgage the house and cash out now, the ownership of the chicken is still yours. After 3 or 5 years, when housing prices rebound, your chicken becomes even more valuable. At that point, the chicken can lay even more eggs, which means you can mortgage out even more money. But for us investors, we use these eggs to buy more chickens instead of eating them, which means we use the money obtained from appreciation and refinancing of the house as down payments for other houses to buy more houses. This has always been our strategy. It's called replacement. But remember, we only eat eggs. We never kill chicken, because this chicken has many other ways, like renting, etc., to continuously give you real passive income and to provide our families long-term wealth. Selling houses is something only the spendthrift do. You must protect your chicken. Now, if someone stops listening here, they'll take out of context. They'll think, all houses are good to buy. I get tons of messages every day. Is this property good to buy? Is this floor plan good? I always joke. If you ask me without telling me the city, you are messing around. Why? Because buying a house is like getting on a high-speed train. Once the train goes in the wrong direction, every decision afterward becomes meaningless. When you buy a train ticket, you gotta ask in advance. First, which train should I get on? That's which city's house you should buy. Second, which seat should I buy? That's which location in the city we should buy. How do I buy the ticket? That's how do I raise the money? And I'm telling you, this is important. Listen patiently. The essence of real estate investment is enjoying the dividends brought by city development. If you buy a house in a remote area of your hometown, then every question you ask afterward is meaningless, because no matter how you buy it, it's wrong. When the direction is wrong, stopping is progress. A senior who told me investing before once told me, only big cities have real estate. But why? When I finally realized it, I only looked at the houses and buy the houses in big cities. The reason is simple. Only in big cities are people forced to buy second-hand houses. That's what brings a large amount of second-hand housing transactions. And that's why real estate investment exists. A place without second-hand transactions has no real estate investment. Remember this, a place where everyone can casually buy new houses. you actually can't make money. Because whether you buy a new house or a second-hand house, whether you buy a good house or a rundown house, when you're going to sell it, it's all considered as a rundown house. That's right. You can see that when the economy is good, the housing prices in small cities are also rising. But after rising, it's probably very hard for you to sell because small cities have plenty of land to build new houses. So when someone wants to buy a house, will they choose a new house or your second-hand house? Of course, a new house, because buying a second-hand house goes against human nature. Everyone is born with a new home obsession. Everyone likes to live in a new house and decorates according to their own favor. So what we invest in is, even if my house is a rundown one, it's still valuable and still in high demand. A landlord with an old rundown house can still confidently name their price. This is the fundamental reason why we can make money from real estate investment. And what place fits this condition? Only big cities. Because in the core areas of big cities, there is almost no land left to develop. But normal people all want to go to the most prosperous places to pan in gold. It's simple. If you have to choose, would you choose to work in New York or Cambodia? For some reason, most people choose New York, right? You know what I mean? That's why houses in big cities are so expensive worldwide. Because in prime locations of big cities, there are basically no new houses, and it's places with rare new house supply. That creates opportunities for real estate investment. According to the Monopoly Manual, even if a player goes to jail and can't move, but they can still collect rent, build houses, and trade. What does this show? I once read a news story about a woman released from prison. Before she went in, she owned a $100,000 house. After serving 10 years in jail, the house is worth $2 million now. You didn't sit in prison these 10 years though, but did you earn $2 million? From this perspective, most of the time, our lives are being busy for nothing. Your lifetime of effort can't compete with someone else's one successful asset allocation. How many people in this world can earn $2 million in their whole life? A lot. But your life today is the result of the choices you made 5 or 10 years ago. And the life you and your family will have 10 years from now depends on the choices you make today. Not having a house is not fatal. Not having common sense and being trapped in the madness of defending your own ignorance. That is the most terrifying thing. Poverty can be rescued, but stupidity is incurable. The reason poor people stay poor is because their worldview has always been wrong. Just like I said at the beginning, if you search on Google, you'll see that most of the titles about real estate are like, will housing prices crash in 2023? Will they crash in 2024, 2025, or in the future? Every year the same. When housing prices rise, those people say prices are unreasonable. The bubble will burst, and whenever there's a correction, they say, this is the last escape window. Sell your house when you're losing money to stop the loss. I laughed. If your worldview is as close as these poor people, rejecting anything unfamiliar, then your life can only stay with the poor. For example, the education you grew up with is to study hard. You will get a good job. With a good job, you'll have a car and a house. Be frugal, save money. And by 60, you might become wealthy. If you can't buy a house, there must be someone sabotaging you. But you know it yourself. This logic is flawed. For example, you studied hard, but after graduation, you couldn't find a job. So, you quietly patched your worldview, but you refused to abandon it. Then you realized you work hard, but still can't afford a house. Housing prices rise faster than your salary. You patched your worldview again. You still persist in staying true to your original aspiration. Your parents worked hard and saved frugally their whole lives. By 60, they saved $100,000, but can't buy any good house. Your worldview gets patched again. You keep holding on to a worldview that's been patched 17 or 18 times. Why can't you just throw it away? The poor people's characteristic, their mentality is fearful. Even after 17 or 18 years of famine, they refuse to abandon this familiar land. They only know how to plow, but they never think of exploring. The poor don't take the first step to explore because they are afraid. Because new things mean chaos. Their minds lack flexibility. They cannot rebuild. But the worldview of the rich is unstable. It adjusts anytime. It must move along with the times. Everyone has their own worldview. Everyone has a logically consistent worldview of their own, but the rich are always ready to destroy it. If a fact doesn't match their theory's anticipation, we adjust it immediately, just like my idol, Elon Musk. Find the problem, fix it fast, launch the next rocket. We digest it silently, accept it, and integrate it into a new framework. So, brothers and sisters, if you want wealth, you have to correct the beliefs that kept you from making money in the past first. A person is the result of their own opinion. Your opinion guides your actions. You must admit that choosing the right mode matters far more than your hard work. No matter what job or lifestyle you choose, you must work hard, but the results can be completely different. The framework is greater than effort. If the direction is wrong, stopping is progress. And content creation entrepreneurship is truly a business where the less effort you put, the more return you get. You can upload the videos to YouTube. These videos are your assets. You only create them once, but they bring you passive income continuously. You might think the higher the clicks, the more ad revenue you get, and that's true. It's better than opening a regular restaurant because at least you don't need the cost of inventory, rent, or staff. But for us, this is not a business. The real business is building a brand like LV, Nike, or Tesla. And YouTube is the place where we can build a brand without spending money. One of the biggest mistakes people make when investing is that they buy only where they're familiar with. So they choose to buy property only in the places they grew up or where they work. They never look at the whole world as a chessboard. Why is it that just because your ancestors chose to settle in one location, you must also settle there? Were the choices they considered back then the same things you need to consider today? Why can't you choose other countries or regions, even just for investment? When we face a completely unfamiliar area, we actually feel a lot of fear inside, and it's very hard to convince your family. But to be a bit harsh, if your family can't even make $1 million US, their judgment is basically not very accurate because they don't understand business and they're not professional investors. This world has always been a game where only a minority make money. Once you stand on the side of the minority, your chances of making money will be much higher than others. I don't know if you've ever thought about this question. Why have housing prices kept rising for so many years, yet so many people are still bearish? The logic is simple. People who can't afford a house will always be bearish on the market. And at any time, people who can't afford a house are the mainstream voice. So today's video is filmed at the risk of offending many people, because I sincerely want to help those who have ambition. Right now, our housing prices might have corrected to point B, but some people's stance is always bound by fragmented information and media. Over the past 30 years, almost every year was a strong bull market for housing. But the media always talk down real estate. Why? Because the media must cater to ordinary people. The media is made for the majority, and the majority can't afford houses. So the majority likes to hear housing crash news. So the media must say the housing prices are going to crash. Keep repeating the crash narrative non-stop. But the real target customers of the property market are wealthy people. So honestly, how these people think doesn't matter at all. That's why even though so many people are bearish on real estate, the market keeps rising. Housing price has a very interesting characteristic. When you look back, past prices always look cheap like cabbages. But at that time, those prices were considered extremely expensive. People always tell me the price was how much back then. It's so cheap. What a pity. I didn't buy. And I'm confused. You talk as if you could actually afford it back then. For ordinary people, no matter what time it is, buying a house is always something you force yourself to do by gritting your teeth. There is never a so-called well-prepared time to buy. Even if 30 years ago, the price was only $500 per square meter, and we now think it's unbelievably cheap. But back then, incomes were nothing like today. And today, if the price is $5,000 per square meter and feels out of reach, looking back 10 years later, it's not surprising at all. Many people want to wait until their conditions are ready to buy. Your so-called ready basically means, first, you have enough down payment. Second, the monthly payment pressure is not too high. Third, the property meets your expectations. But let me tell you very responsibly, if you just work an ordinary job, that is impossible while you are earning and saving. your down payment becomes not enough again. You'll find that quality homes in major cities double every 5 years. Your full payment from 5 years ago just becomes the down payment 5 years later. What used to be within reach in top cities becomes something you can only downgrade into second or third tier cities. So the question now is, can you seize this correction opportunity to buy? Feel free to leave a comment down below if you have any questions. As long as you can find 1 or 2 useful sentences in today's content that can help you live a better life, I will be completely satisfied. Alright, I'll continue sharing tips on how to become wealthy, how to be an entrepreneur, an investor, and achieving financial freedom every Sunday at 8:30 p.m. If you don't want to miss out, make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the little bell. And generously share this video. I sincerely wish all of you who like this video will reach financial freedom soon. Alright, I'll see you next week. Bye.